Okay, well, thanks very much, Drew and Joe. I try to remind everybody that this is the time of the week here in academia when a lot of professors schedule office hours. I'm not sure whether it's because they only have that amount of time during the week. Most professors I know here work very hard. It also can be because they expect this to be the least number of students coming for their office hours. But in any case, we're usually generally pretty loose during this time of year. As Drew knows, I always like to show a webcam or two while we get started. I have the privilege of having Joe Agron from American School and University on the call at the moment, and he's going to tell me when I'm wrong. And I also have my colleague Drew, and it's always fun to see what others are doing. Are these guys out for lunch right now? There, I see they're moving. Okay, people are working.
Yeah, it's about lunchtime there.
I was looking over at the Stanford University Hospital webcam, and it sure didn't look like anybody was working. In any case, I hope I probably should not say much more about who's working on whose construction site. In any case, it brings the point home is that a lot of what we do is to get this thing built safely, under budget, and for it to work for a very long time. Campuses technically, I suppose, have infinite life cycles, and so we a lot of what we do has to do with making buildings they're beautiful, functional, and they contribute to the brand identity of the institution, and in this case, use a state asset. So when we deal with this particular topical issue in the past, as you know, that we go over, we go through the nuts and bolts of standards development every day, but once a week we like to stand back and say, what does a week's worth look like? What does it mean? How does it conform to the overall strategy? Typically, it's a policy, star we steer by, and so in this case here, I wanted to dwell a little bit on something that cuts across some of our guiding principles, at least with respect to how fast we have to move. This is one of many teleconferences we have. We've got them all archived here. It's easier to do today's teleconference because we've had a lot of the foundation of understanding built here, and so if you find them making a shortcut, assuming you know something, it's because much like a professor teaching a class, we went over that last week, and if you like, we can return to it, but we do want to advance a little bit here. And so I felt that the continuous maintenance process is one that's noteworthy and we need to be aware of. And I'm normally only allowed to do this in 1 or 2 slides, and so it's nice to be able to do that during at least during a half hour a week. Also, I'm hoping that I'm educating the industry, I'm educating the trade associations to carry this forward to their members. We need subject matter experts from every place. Many of them accumulate in the trade association, so in a certain sense we're training the trainer during these sessions. So but with only 3 of us, they're generally fairly well attended, and the nice thing about doing it this way is that you don't have to turn your cell phone off. But we have many unrefined moments, as you'll probably see, and you'll also notice that since June we've got about 111. We're coming into 1,100 views at the moment, and I think that's a lot. It's certainly more than attendance that we get during teleconferences, during conferences. So this is our 4 canons, as I like to say: safer, simpler, low cost, and longer lasting. And when people ask us what we do, I say this is what we do here. And down here you'll see some proof and some estimates and tangible evidence of what we've been able to do. So much of what we do is avoided cost or avoided regulatory burden that we really have to go put extra effort into explain to what we do. I guess that, on another note regarding how these particular sessions, these Friday afternoon sessions work, is that this is something we did about a month ago, and I'm often surprised that a small calculation subroutine on wet bulb temperature would get 62 views. That continues to surprise me, and it's good because it was an innovation by my colleague David Anderson, and it appears as though a lot of people in the building control industry are interested in that. Here's another one, and we'll talk a little bit more detail about this when we talk about continuous maintenance. Here's another one. This was a proposal by ASHRAE to put building temperature sensors on every building, and there was only 1, 2, 4 of us, 3 of us, and since August we've had 132 views on it. There are some very talented musicians I know that don't have that many views, so we must be doing something right. Let's put it that way. So these seem to work. So let's get back to what our week looks like before we launch into this in earnest. This week we dealt with. So today Drew uploaded a summary of the document, our document for today, having to do with power system reliability. So every day we pick a standard, we just put our hand in the river and pull one up, and this is what happened today. Yesterday we were dealing with a new proposal, a new document, actually it's a new standard being developed by the plumbers and the American Sanitary Association. They are attempting to prepare a consensus document for professional qualifications for the inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection systems. So we're going to get that document. I don't know how this document will conform or compete with NFPA, with the NFPA suite. It strikes me that this is something already covered, but maybe a surprise, or maybe other jurisdictions want a different document. Maybe it's a better document. I don't know, but in any case, so we're seeing a lot of this out there now, a lot of what appears to be scope creep, but if you've got a good system of developing documents, then you do that, and that's what a lot of them are doing. Once a week I like to pick one international standard that's important to our industry. We've been dealing with this since 2012. We felt that our industry is globalizing, but more important, a lot of our electrical suppliers are concentrated in this area here. A lot of them have escaped. They're moving to places where it's more tax friendly. So, for example, Eaton moved its headquarters into Ireland, and you're starting to see Schneider. It used to be Square D in Detroit. You're seeing Siemens here. They are all looking for this market. All those companies need growth, and this is where growth is happening. And it's important because right in this area you've got 23 votes. Here you've got 1, 2, 3 votes. Here you've got 23 votes, and this very large market over here. So I feel it's important that our industry at least be aware of that, not just the facility side, but a lot of other disciplines, academic disciplines, will have to deal with this one country, one vote system we have. What else did we deal with this week? We dealt with recreational equipment. This is a lot of college campuses, Joe. You probably know that there's a lot of interest in making sure that the students have good fitness equipment. They're at the time of their lives when they want to be very fit, and so there's a fair amount of money going into that. And of course there's the athletic part, not just the recreation, and then of course it's a place where we have to be mindful of what do they call them now? Persons with limited functional limitations and impairments. So in other words, I guess that's a new word for it. So this is a document for that. I think Monday we started, we are going to be challenging the NFPA decision on the testing of I believe it's a part of the supervisory switches on fire alarm systems. So again, our listeners are welcome to drill down a little bit more into that. Those first 4 were what I call periodic or batch developed or batch mode standards. They don't move continuously. Now comes a document, or at least a standards developer, that does move continuously, and we'll get to that very shortly. Dealing with telecommunication systems in schools and hospitals and colleges and universities. So not all of their documents are running continuous maintenance, but obviously in an industry where information is important and moving it around, we're mindful of what the TIA does. So we did manage to get some words out this week. It's never enough, but it's in that context that we understand that the nature and the character of the industry determines whether or not that industry wants to move in 30-day intervals, 30 to 45-day intervals, or whether they can move in up to 5 years. So what I try to explain to my colleagues is that the U.S. standard system is set up so that we don't have a lot of central, I'll say federal government control over technological development. In one of our earlier teleconferences, we talked about one of the purposes of the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act was that it was to encourage innovation by the private sector, and standardization and innovation are closely related. That'll be a future teleconference. So what you'll have is, so we would try to make a point here is that that all these documents here end up being incorporated by reference up into here, and how fast they move is what the topic of today's discussion is. Over here you'll see that that ANSI is aware that if you're going to follow the rules of the law of the land, you've got to know what the law is, and so they've made it easier. They haven't turned on a dime, but they are making it easier, and by slow degrees you're seeing that the public does have access to the laws that apply to them. So that's what our iconic iceberg diagram is supposed to convey. And as I try to say here, there's about 9,500 references to ANSI standards in the Federal Code of Regulations. So I encourage you to go back to that teleconference if you're interested in any more of that. Here we see the NFPA process, which is the one where I started in. I'm still involved in that. I've been on the NEC for nearly 20 years now. And you can see that over 36 weeks in a 3-year cycle that it's fairly well filled with different developmental stages they have here. So if you just assume it's a National Electrical Code, or it could be the code for the sprinklering of laboratory animals, or a building code. NFPA even has a building code. They go through this process, and it's fairly, I think it's fairly rigorous. They're all rigorous to a degree, to the degree that that industry needs to be, depending on its character, how large the market is, and how strong the trade association is. So this is the one that I'm most familiar with, but there are other regimes, other ways of doing it. This is the ICC co-development cycle, and you can see this is a previous one. This is a graphic I wanted to get across here. So over about a 14-month period, new ideas are allowed to come in over the transom, so to say. What is different about ICC, though, is that they'll have staff look to make sure that the proposals have merit to be brought onto the committee agenda. Unlike the NFPA, where any idea gets on there, it could be the nature of the building industry. You get a lot of ideas that maybe are repetitious, and so you have to have the staff try to make the meeting effective and meaningful for the volunteer committee members, and so very often they have to cull through some of the ideas that come in over. NFPA does not do that, but ICC does. It's probably a matter of necessity that they do. So that's they're on a 3-year cycle. Over here we have the National Electrical Safety Code. This one is done every 5 years, and it used to be ANSI accredited. I have to tell you, I'm looking for the ANSI logo on here, and I haven't found it, and I've been concerned a bit about that, because ANSI is a very important part of the U.S. economy, in my opinion, and it's very necessary for them to be there. For that logo not to be there troubles me a bit, but that's a different teleconference. So right here, you can see what the developmental cycle looks like now. That we have a full 3-year cycle here. And they get into issues that's not normally done by the by the National Electrical Code. So over here you have the National Electrical Code, which is principally electrical systems within a building, and over here you have the National Electrical Safety Code, and they deal with outside of the building issues. So, for example, this is actually the 2012 NESC, and you can see that they deal with. Let's see, what is this? This is icing on overhead power lines. That's not something the NEC does, and so they make some definitions, and you can obviously see that Joe is up here in New Jersey somewhere, that the engineers in those areas are engineering the power lines with a different set of calculations, or at least coefficients in the calculations for transmission line loading. So that's an example of a very common 5-year cycle, and many of them are. So let's see, let's get over, so to drill down into what the meaning of continuous maintenance is you have a document and your technology is moving, the markets are moving fast enough where you feel that it's necessary to get new ideas into it and incorporate this new idea by reference based upon a fixed periodic interval. So if we take an ASHRAE document, ASHRAE 90.1 will take their continuously maintained addenda, package them up into one document, which is published every 3 years. But the price you pay for being able to modify your document more or less continuously is that you now have to include a lot of other references to addenda, and I guess I was going to cut over to that at some point here so we can see how ASHRAE does it. So, but it's important to know that ANSI has about 250 standards developers. It might be more, might be less, and less than 25 of them, about 1/10 of them, are maintaining their documents continuously. And I think it's noteworthy. So if you look at the list here, evidently the Auto Glass Safety Council needs to change its documents quite a bit. That could be that there's innovations happening in the technology. Maybe maybe they know they don't need to do this because it's a fairly standards development is non-trivial, as I like to say, but it's very dependent. It can be scaled. It's a very scalable enterprise. So that's the good news about it. But you'll see here that if you look along this list, it makes sense that an organization that's in charge of food safety, consumer product safety, that those kind of organizations, American Gas Association, you want to discuss among your experts what the best way of doing things are as soon as possible, especially in the event of a disruptive unlocking event which causes a natural disaster. Some of the other ones, though, seem to follow what are what I'd call federal strategic initiatives, homeland security, energy security. So on that other list, you saw that UL, Sanitation Foundation, telecommunications industry, those can be considered documents, at least I consider them, documents and standards developed that are principally concerned with safety. And now the other group here is, and you come over here, you'll see that there's a lot of green, a lot of what I'll call green or energy conservation organizations, and this is, in my own words, a rather competitive, nearly crowded space. And it doesn't surprise me that a lot of these organizations are competing for their stake in the green agenda. And so they're all moving rather quickly, and we've had some experience with ASHRAE, which you'll begin to see very shortly. What's noteworthy here, of course, is that these are the organizations that are working on every 3 to 5 fixed intervals. Not on there 3 to 5 year periodic maintenance intervals. And what's not on here, though, is the financial is it FASB? Financial Services Board. There's a GS, Financial Services Administrative Board. Maybe it's FSAB. In any case, financial standards are not ANSI accredited, but they they operate, and they have a consensus, a public review period, which is similar. I'll call it ANSI-like. ANSI is the rigorous way of determining consensus. Some of these other organizations, they have a quasi or a consortia of some sort. It's important to know that not everything, of course, in our economy is governed by, not all industries are self-governing. In general, industries that are involved in ANSI processes are governing, and it's also important to remember that the government itself has an interest in all this, but not everything has to be ANSI accredited. And I've heard this number here from one of my colleagues at ANSI, and it's just the nature of the technology, the industry, the character of the industry that determines whether or not the ANSI process works for them. So, any questions? No? You're allowed to unmute yourself, Joe, if you like. Andrew? How's my sound? The sound still all right?
Sounds pretty good. You had a bump in it. It went down, but it lost some of the harshness, so overall it's still good.
Okay. All right. So let's move ahead here. I'm using the ASHRAE suite and the green suite, I'll call it the green agenda, or the sustainability zeitgeist, to show how, despite the fact that it is moving quickly, some will argue that the fact that the Earth is warming globally, or climate change is happening so quickly, that it is a public safety hazard. That's not this discussion. Good people will disagree on that one, but it is causing us to have to be very aware of what's going on in the green agenda. So I picked ASHRAE because, and more recently, I think they've developed a more of a closer collaboration with the IGCC and the Green Building Council and the folks over at LEED. Here is what I call a code win or a standards win. This is what it looks like when you're actually down in the weeds the way we normally are. The other 5 days of the week we're getting down, and we are. I'm trying to give you an example of what it looks like. So here's my particular track record. This is ASHRAE's site for producing comments, and I've submitted 20 comments so far. And you can see that they book them here. It's a pretty good process, So this is where, when you see a document and you see something you don't like, you can say, well, really, we think that that's not quite correct. You can see mostly they're not, mostly they're rejected, but there are some that were accepted, and some of them are still in process. So. Oh, these are all of them. There have been some that have been, I don't want to show you my batting average here, but suffice to say, the riskier the subject, which is what we do, the less likely you're ready to get a home run. But we are in the market, so to say. Let me close out some of these so we can navigate ourselves around a little bit more. So here's me writing on behalf of my colleague, Dennis Appel. He didn't feel comfortable putting it in his own name, so this is an example where there would have been more sampling of air, more sensors. We find a lot of that, and as a professional engineer, he says, you know, this is not appropriate. This will cost us too much money. Sure, it'll do something, but it's certainly incrementally not as effective as doing something else. So that's all I need to know. The committee proposed the 500. With no technical substantiation, and as I like to point out, that they agreed that we produced a rebuttal with no technical substantiation, and the committee agreed. So we sometimes call that market making, and this is America. You're allowed to use any process. Those same processes could lead to innovations. So very often innovation is wasteful in the early on, but in this case the committee felt that we were right, that Dennis was right, and they accepted the comment without question. And it becomes important in some other documents, as you'll begin to see. So why this is important? This can change in as little as 30 days or 30 to 45 days. If you come over every week, and I guess I didn't put this up ahead of time, but if you go to ANSI, every week they prepare a document that that lets the world know what they're doing. These are standards developers, and they say, well, here's a deadline, and all these organizations have new ideas. They're out there for you to review. So here's the carpet cleaning folks, and they have a new. They've just marked up their document. So this is up for so you can see. This is up for public review. You can see all the strike and bold in here. So that's what's done here. And it's announced, and typically it's continuous maintenance developers. If you come over here, ANSI will actually list that. Let's see, continuous maintenance. Here we are. So this is the same document I showed you earlier in this presentation. This is the current list. So over here, then, it's important to know that and I'm going to work this in reverse. How about that? Here's what is enforceable law. We'll start from that. And in our case, it's the International Energy Conservation Code. If you're going to build a building in the state of Michigan, you're going to have to conform to the International Energy Conservation Code. So that's what that requires. But what happens is that ICC is referring to people that are closer to the action on that. So that means they're incorporating by reference the NC 90.1 into the International Energy Conservation Code. So this says the word standard. Remember? So here we are. Here's the law. Here's the code. Here's the standard. And now here's the guideline. Here's the guideline. And this isn't a 189.1, but as you'll see in a moment here, that that NFPA 13 was one that would presented some onerous costs for us. So we tried to say that they can become public law virtually overnight, but in practical reality they don't. There's a lot of safeguards that states put in for not adopting the latest version of a code or a standard or a guideline or recommended practice, and that but theoretically it's possible. And if you go back a couple weeks when we talked about incorporation by reference, you'll see that there are many legislators in many countries, and I picked the case of Canada, that were very concerned about this very thing, of things happening overnight in the cloak of darkness. How do we say? What's the contemporary way of saying it? Well, we have to pass the bill to see what's in it, and very often that's what's happening here. And I don't want to get political here, but that's kind of what happens in some of this. So why is this important? This goes back to this particular, let's see, was it done? When did we do this one? This is David explaining to the world why it's not effective to put temperature sensors on every building. And that's the one down here where we had 160. Here we go. This is the one here. What they wanted to do was to put temperature sensors on every building. And U of M, as we tried to point out in our justification, we've had 2 temperature sensors across a 6-mile square area since the 80s. And so to put one on every building would be at least $5,000, plus you install maintenance costs, wiring costs, firmware, then you've got to monitor it, and most of all, the guys are saying they're not reliable, you're always having to maintain it, and the difference in temperature between a building on campus that's only 100 feet away is really not appreciable. In fact, we only see a couple degree difference within 4 miles across the 6-mile stretch that U of M occupies. So it was not going to be cost effective for us, and so as you can see, it's got some interest. We did manage to turn it back. They used specifically the word campus. So there's a lot of good people on that committee. We didn't agree. Evidently enough people agree with us that they did change it. That doesn't mean they're going to come back and make us do it, but we don't feel that given all the other array of choices we have that it's appropriate for us to do that, given all the other opportunities we have to save money. So my colleague here, and I'm just basically copying what they had told me. This is a summary for the campus at least will have its own outdoor air sensor and occupancy schedule. So this is what we asked to strike out, and what this means is if you assume this is something where Joe could actually help, is that if you assume that there's every building, it runs about $5,000 per, the U of M, say U of M had 150 odd buildings with another $5,000 per annual cost, and then you roll in some assumptions about running cost, and you take 1,500 colleges and universities, not to mention school, let's just work with colleges and universities, and that they're maybe each, all those 1,500 colleges and universities are have 10 buildings on average. They probably have more, but our bottom line is that that's going to get to $2 billion very quickly. In fact, I did the calculation. It's $1.5 billion. Is that real money? No, it's not, but it's avoided regulatory costs, which leads me to this is our cinematic moment right now, folks. How do we fairly? So that was clearly a case. You saw two examples in a continuous maintenance process, administered by ASHRAE, that those were not effective ways to save energy, and so how do you count something that didn't happen? We know we put effort into it. We know that had we not made that effort, it would have been a burden. We can't say the degree to which individual states would have done it, but this happens every day, sometimes twice a day, and we're only able to get so much of it. So we asked the question, and this is our cinematic moment, as I say, and I don't have an answer to this. How do we do it? We do our level best. We're always checking. Calls like this help us generate debate. Hopefully people will come challenge. Maybe we're underestimating it. That's also possible. And when I use the term market making through the standards development process, I always like to try to say that we need the innovation. Creativity is not efficient, and sometimes you overstep. Your good intentions are often they often will overreach. It doesn't mean they're not intended. They didn't have a integrity of purpose. But in our case, we were in the market, and our intention was to try to do something we think is reasonable. It is very difficult to get consensus in this industry. We'll say that. So we basically did what we felt was good for us, and there was, except for the people that I rally, no one else to disagree with us, and so obviously the committee agreed with us. And to return to my original point, that this is what a continuous maintenance process can do. It could have easily have happened with a periodic maintenance process, but given that there's an agenda out there to save energy, and that and there are a lot of people in that area, it's important that we follow this and have an effective way and have some expertise to bear upon it, that will not just help our interest, but what we believe is the industry at large. And with that, I think we're coming close to the end here. So I'm hoping that I might get a question out of Joe before we close the call. You have anything to say, Joe? Joe Agron from American School and University.
No particular questions at this time, but I would like to touch base with you sometime next week to talk about a few things.
Okay. Well, I can actually, I can stop the recording here. We can do it right now. Our calendars might be. So let me close the call right now. And I think next week I might try to get into this particular problem of getting avoided regulatory burden. It's one that we need to be orthodox. We can't overshoot, we can't undershoot, we have to be just right. And I'm one of those people that thinks if you've got a lot of people guessing at the cost, you have a lot of, that's how prices are discovered. And I think we can discover costs in a similar way, but you've got to get enough people out here throwing numbers around. I'm an engineer, and not everything in the world can be solved with a single point solution, solve for X. Sometimes you have to solve things with iteration. In fact, that's one of the bigger mindset differences I've noticed. A lot of the students just assume that they can take enough guesses, make the errors smaller, and you've got your solution. Whereas I grew up in a world where you get your equations set up, and you get the same number of unknowns and same number of equations, and then you've got to determine the system you can actually solve. That's not how it is now. So I hope that you'll see that announced probably sometime early Monday. I'm encouraging people who are interested in standards action to sign up for our blog. We have a larger, what we call our C-suite site, where we deal with larger, the larger policy context. Essentially, everything that we do on every Friday, from a policy standpoint, we try to pipe that over here. We have an annual report. I've got to get my graphics person to get this fixed, but in any case, it's fairly extensive. We felt like we had a pretty good year. We think we're taking about $6 billion of avoided regulatory cost or actual real cost out of the industry. So $6 billion is the University of Michigan's overall budget, including the hospital. So a shorthand way of saying what our activity here is basically taking the equivalent of a University of Michigan budget out of the entire industry every year. And with that, I'll close the call. Thank you very much for your attention, Joe and Drew.